And the biggest thing is a commitment, whether it's corporate or entrepreneurship. You have to commit to what you're doing 100%, especially if you go into entrepreneurship, because that's what makes the big difference. There's something that happens in the universe when you go from, well, maybe I'll try this, to I have a burning desire, I'm going to make this happen. Okay. So my journey started with a bottle of Tide. So I was pushing my son, who was 18 months at the time, he's 21 now. I had become a stay-at-home mom. Before that, I worked, my husband worked, and then all of a sudden it was like, we went from 2 incomes to 1 income, and things got really tight, and I was the keeper of the family budget. So one day I was in Walmart, and I was reaching for a bottle of Tide, and I was doing the math in my head, and I went, I'm going to be over budget in the household categories if I buy an extra bottle of Tide. And I just was like, this is ridiculous. I thought, I'm going to go into debt over a bottle of Tide, or I'm going to have to pull it from here or there. And so you saw my son kicking there. And then, so that bottle of Tide all of a sudden stopped being a bottle of Tide. It became every no I'd ever heard in my life. I grew up one of 6. My father got laid off, and things got really super tight. We lost the heat in the house for 2 years. I remember the school going on a school trip. I couldn't go because we couldn't afford it. And this is back in the day before, you got a trophy for breathing, where they'd actually have you stand outside and wave bye to your friends as you're being left behind. And I just remember that bus taking off going, gosh, I really wish I could do that. And so I was tearing up because of all these no's I'd heard, thinking about my child. And I was like, gosh, if I can't freaking have another bottle of Tide, what am I going to do when he gets older? What about his braces and his travel baseball and all these things? So I then became very sad. Actually, what happens is I get mad and then I cry, right? So I'm like looking at this Tide, and I'm getting angrier and angrier. And I was like, you know what? I'm changing this right now. Because I knew we wanted to have more kids too. And I was like, I'm ending this storyline. I'm not going to live my adult life the way I grew up, which I had a wonderful set of parents and a loving family. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't all bad, but I was tired of living like that. I wanted to have what I wanted to have, and I wanted my children to have what they wanted to have. And I knew my husband was doing everything he could. So I became committed in that aisle, and I said, I'm going to start my own business, because my husband already has his own. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. So I said, I'm starting a business, and I drove home. So yes, I was starting a business. And this became my mantra: no more no's, only how. Because there's 1,000 obstacles that are going to be put in front of you as you go on your journey, whether it's corporate or entrepreneurship. It's not a matter of how hitting an obstacle, it's how many and how are you going to blow through them. So I said, no more no's, only how. I'm a person of possibility. And then I started to realize as I went about my journey that there's resources everywhere. Think about it. You turn on the TV, you turn on CNN, and you see all these things going on around you. There's resources everywhere. So it's a matter of personal resourcefulness. And I knew that I really had to dig deep in this. So, great. I'm starting a business. So I sit down at my kitchen table, and I'm like, get out my pen and paper. I'm like, here we go. Chirp. The crickets chirping. And I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I want to do. So every day I just wrote 3 ideas a day, no matter how ridiculous they were. I didn't edit myself. And at the end of 10 days, I had 30 really bad ideas. And I was like, ugh. That was my 10-day challenge. So then I go to have lunch with my former boss at O'Charlie's. And he says, what are you up to? And I tell him, I'm trying to start this business. And then all of a sudden, looking at him, it was like he had this giant light bulb over his head. I was like, duh, that's what I need to do. I need to do what he did, but in reverse. So when I was in college, I was a business communications major, and I wanted to be Darren Kagan when I grew up. And unfortunately, I had to pay my way through school because remember, it was always no. So I was paying my way through school. And I had the opportunity to meet Raymond Cash, who became my business partner, and he was my boss first, and he was a mentor. And I was offered a job working at his company. So if I made an A or B, I got reimbursed for my school. So I started working for him. He was in the solid waste business. So I remember I was like 19 years old, driving around going, I'm in the garbage business. This is crazy. Yeah, I drive by Campbell High School where Julia Roberts went to school, and she was at the peak of her Pretty Woman fame. I'm like, I'm down in the dumps every day, and Julia Roberts is in Hollywood being Pretty Woman. I just thought it was kind of funny. But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. But I watched him build and sell these garbage businesses. And a national consolidator like Waste Management, everybody knows who that is, would come in and they'd buy these small companies and then they'd go public. And he did that 3 times during the course that I knew him, and he was worth gazillions of dollars. And I thought, I don't have a business to sell, but what if I became the driver, the consolidator in another industry, and then we went public? And I'm 28 years old, so I'm fairly naive, right? So I'm like, yeah, that's totally possible. Of course, can't afford a bottle of Tide, but I'm gonna run out and go buy some businesses. So I said, it was like one of those moments where I just went, hey, Raymond, why don't we do that? Why don't we do that together? I was kind of telling him about this, and he's like, well, what would it be? I was like, well, solid waste is already consolidated, but what about liquid waste? Isn't that exciting? So he's like, well, we start talking about it because this would be a normal thing for us to talk about. I know it would be kind of odd for y'all, but so we start talking about it. By the end of the lunch, he's like, you might be onto something there. And the thing is with him, and as you go about your entrepreneurial journey or your corporate journey, you have to sell what somebody wants to buy. Okay, so I didn't say to Raymond, hey, let's go make a lot of money. He already had a lot of money. He was living on 150 acres in a 13,000 square foot house with elevators, so he did not need money. But what he did need is an adventure, and that's what I sold him on. Like, how cool would it be to go ring the bell on Wall Street, and that would be the cherry on top of his career, and just got him all pumped up. So he said, well, why don't you go research that and then get back to me? So I said, okay. So I spent the next 6 months writing a business plan, doing the research, talking to people, and we ended up going to the national conference for liquid waste, woohoo, at the Opryland Hotel, and you could see the fragmentation in the marketplace, and we ended up shaking on it right there. So he became my first partner. So go ahead, Galit. Now, I was actively trying to grow my business at this point. So I'd call up a lawyer and I'd talk to different people. I remember this one lawyer, I told him what I was gonna do. And he's like, remember, I'm 28 and I'm female. And they're like, yeah, right, that's gonna happen. And he started laughing at me, and it really just pissed me off. I was like, okay. So anytime I started having fears or doubts or anything like that, I thought about this lawyer who laughed at me, and his laughter became the soundtrack for my success story. So that's what drove me. I was like, I'm gonna show him. So again, it's about commitment. Like, I was committed to changing my story, and it wasn't about trying, it wasn't about staying motivated. It was, I was on fire, and I wasn't gonna stop until I had reached my goal. And my goal was to create 7 figures within 2 years in cash. So that became my goal. Perfectly reasonable, right? And I committed on behalf of my children. This is where my kids go to school, or went, because one's in college now. The other 2 were there. And then this is my oldest son who was in the grocery cart. That's him graduating from his school and going off to college. And then I wanted a beautiful home and a beautiful environment, and this is my backyard. And I wanted opportunities for my children. I wanted them to play travel baseball and do all the things. I wanted them to go to Italy on the school trip. I wanted them to be able to do things. That's fine, you can move forward. It's just so exciting, isn't it? So you can go ahead. Now, when you start your business, this is what you think is going to happen, right? So I buy my first business. I walk in the door, and I'm taking a moment for myself. I open the door, step up, and I'm hearing, ha, ha. Yeah, this is what I'm hearing in my head. And then, like, 2 seconds later, you can keep going. Yeah, this is what happens, right? So you can move forward one more. So then this guy says, I'm like this, ah, and this guy goes, are you new here? And I said, yeah, I'm new here. And I said, I guess you could say that, I am. He's like, that's great. We've been needing help for quite a while. Could you make me 50 copies of this? And I was like, here we go again. You know, remember the lawyer. And so then I thought, well, I have a decision to make. I can either go, oh, no, you didn't, and say, I'm your boss, and you're going to make those copies. Or I can choose to be humble and gracious and make those copies. So I said, hey, I'm happy to help you with that. Where's the copier? And he's like, oh, it's over there. So I go in and make the copies. And then 30 minutes later, the old owner gets everybody together. It's like 40 employees in this one place. And he announces that he sold the company, and the new owner is, and I'm like, there you go, you move forward. I'm like, that's right, that's me. And that's him. He was like, oh my God, right? So I was like, right. So, every once in a while there was those good moments like that where you got to kind of stick it to them a little. So you just have to let all that go. When people underestimate you, just laugh all the way to the bank. That's the way I looked at it. Go ahead. So, oh my gosh. The next thing was I had to raise $13 million to keep the company growing because we were doing acquisitions. Well, I'm not a mathlete. I know, hard to believe, but I never liked math. That's why I was a communications major. And then we did a thing called a private placement memorandum. I had no idea what that was. It's PPM for short, and it's when you get a bunch of rich people together to raise money. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're doing a PPM. That's great. Oh, and here you go. You're going to present the financials. I'm like, no, not that. Anything but that. So that was me that day. I was in the back freaking out, like to the point of hyperventilating because I'd never spoken in public. First of all, I was already nervous enough. And then I had to go do something I was very uncomfortable with and had like a hang up about. So then I thought, well, I have to raise this money. I have to get over it. I was literally seeing stars, and I thought, okay, brown bag. Then I was like, okay, Joyce, pull it together. Yes, this is uncomfortable. Yes, I don't like doing this, but I have to do it. So put on your big girl panties and get out there and do it. So that's what I did. And now that I love actually speaking, and this became my new mantra after that. Anything that scares me, I'm going to face down. So I went to Toastmasters and I learned how to speak because I felt like that was ridiculous. I have to be able to stand and deliver a message. And every single person in this room needs to be able to do that. You need to speak your truth no matter what. So I overcame that fear. And I ended up building this company. We went from $0 to $50 million in 18 months. And at that point, we did a reverse merger and went public on NASDAQ, got the company up to $125 million. And it kind of blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God, I remember sitting at my kitchen table trying to think of an idea, and all of a sudden I have 350 employees. And you just never know what's possible in life for yourself, so don't limit yourself. And so now what I do is I do coaching, and I help empower other women. So I actually had a very cool moment. I was working with one of my clients who I was consulting with. You can go to my next screen. And a company called Lamtastic, and she was a mompreneur trying to grow. She started her business with her daughters in her kitchen, and she wanted to grow, so she hired me to help her scale. And we ended up getting the opportunity to pitch to Walmart. We flew out to Bentonville, and I remember standing in Walmart thinking 20 years later, this is really freaking super cool. You know, it was like a full circle moment for me. We pitched them, we got the products into the store. Now we're in 25,000 different locations, or different doors, about 30 different locations, national. But for me personally, to go from standing at, you know, with a bottle of this Tide, you can move it forward, to standing in that aisle, to setting a goal for myself, staying committed to the course, and seeing what was possible, it really just opened the world to me, because I saw what can happen when you're committed to your journey, and whatever that is, your family. And you don't have to sacrifice your family in order to be successful, because my whole career has been designed around my children. So after I finished with this, I've done other ventures based on their ages and stages. And I actually even had a clause in my employment contract when we moved to Texas where I actually ended up making more money because I said I wouldn't move 50 miles outside of Atlanta because my children were being watched by my family. So it's totally possible, totally doable. And the biggest thing is getting clarity on what you want. I read the book Think and Grow Rich, and it talks about having specific numbers, deadlines, what you're willing to give. So I would suggest to you, big time, get clear on what it is that you want, need, and expect. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to take it? I'm like, okay. And Darren referenced this. The best way to predict your future is to create it. And that's the truth. That is the truth. It's really, whatever you want in this life, it is possible. You just got to get clear on what that is and commit to doing it. So I applaud you all for being here today. And I want you to think bigger. Think bigger for yourself. Don't limit yourself. Why do you have to be here when you can be here? You just have to learn to get that belief in your abilities. And then when I work with my coaching clients, I have a 90-day sprint where it helps them get clear and get focused on what it's like creating mini years. Each quarter is its own year. So if you email me or you can actually sign up at joycebone.com and I'll send you a copy of that sprint if you want it. And that's my contact information if I can help you. So that's it. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.